The gun went off before she even made it to the elevator. Tara heard it the way you hear thunder when you're already drenched. Not as a warning, but as confirmation that things had already gone wrong. She pressed herself against the wall of the parking garage, the concrete cold through her blouse, her heart hitting her ribs like it wanted out. 3 floors above her, someone was screaming. She didn't look up. She already knew what was up there. She'd been the one to find the discrepancy in the first place. The number that didn't match. The column that was off by exactly enough to mean something. $12 million. Hidden in plain sight inside a freight logistics account that nobody was supposed to look at twice. She had looked at it twice. That was, apparently, a problem. Tara had been working for Whitmore and Associates for 11 months when she found the number. She was a mid-level accountant, 3rd desk from the window, the one who always brought lunch from home because she couldn't afford the sandwich place downstairs. She had a student loan that felt like a second mortgage and a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, where the radiator knocked every night at 2 a.m. like someone was trying to get in. She was 29 years old, and she was, in every measurable way, unremarkable. Her supervisor called her detail-oriented, the way people say plain, with a kind of resigned respect. She was good at numbers. She always had been. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't say one thing and mean another. They didn't smile at you in the break room and then write your name on a list you weren't supposed to know about. Numbers just sat there, patient and honest, and if you were quiet enough to listen, they told you exactly what was happening. What was happening, according to the numbers, was this. Someone inside Whitmore and Associates had been siphoning money through a shell company called Trident Meridian LLC for at least 3 years. The amounts were always just under the threshold for automatic review, always rounded, always clean, professional. Tara had found it on a Tuesday. By Thursday, 2 of her colleagues had been put on administrative leave. By Friday, her supervisor had stopped making eye contact with her. By Saturday morning, she was in a parking garage in Lower Manhattan with gunfire above her head and no idea how to get out. She ran. That was the only decision she made in the next 4 minutes. Run, and don't stop. She ran through the exit stairwell, out a side door onto a street she didn't recognize, past a dry cleaner and a bodega and a man walking a dog who looked at her like she was exactly as panicked as she felt. She didn't have her bag. She had her phone, cracked screen, 17% battery, her transit card, and the folded printout she'd shoved into her pocket 2 days ago when she first understood what she was looking at. She didn't know why she'd kept it. She stopped 2 blocks away behind a bus shelter and put her hands on her knees and breathed. Her heels. She'd worn heels that day, which felt insane now, some leftover reflex from trying to look like she belonged somewhere she clearly didn't, were already cutting into the backs of her ankles. She pulled out her phone. Her sister didn't pick up. Her friend Marcus didn't pick up. She thought about calling the police, and then thought about what she'd say, and how quickly the people who'd set up a $12 million shell company would know she'd said it. The phone died at 11%. She stood up. The city moved around her, indifferent. A cab went by, a delivery truck. 2 women in workout clothes talking about someone named Bethany, who had apparently done something unforgivable at a spin class. Tara looked down at the printout in her hand. She'd been trying to trace where the money went. She'd gotten part of the way there before she stopped, before she understood that she was following a path that someone had laid carefully enough that it curved right back around and pointed at her. The last company in the chain, the one actually receiving the funds, was registered to an address she didn't recognize, a building in Midtown. She'd driven past it once on her way to a client meeting and thought it looked like the kind of place that had a dress code for the lobby. She didn't have anywhere else to go. The building had no name on the outside, just a number, etched in brass, and a doorman who looked like he'd been hired specifically to make people feel like they'd made a wrong turn. Tara walked up to him anyway, because the alternative was standing on the sidewalk, until whoever had fired that gun found her. "I need to see whoever runs this building," she said. The doorman looked at her the way people had been looking at her for most of her professional life, like she was slightly out of place and fully aware of it. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then I'm going to have to ask you." "I have documentation," she said, "of money that belongs to someone in this building being misrouted by a firm called Whitmore and Associates. $12 million. If the person it belongs to wants it back, they should probably talk to me." She held up the printout. The doorman's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind his eyes did. He picked up a phone. She waited 6 minutes. She counted them. When the elevator opened and a man in a charcoal suit came toward her, she noticed 3 things in order. He was young, he was blank-faced in the way that meant he'd been trained to be, and he was looking at her the way you look at something unexpected that hasn't yet been determined to be a threat. "Mr. Varro will see you," he said. She followed him into the elevator. The doors closed. She watched the numbers climb and thought about the radiator in her apartment, and the loan payment due on the 15th, and the fact that her shoes were still cutting into her heels, and she still hadn't decided whether any of this was a good idea. The doors opened onto a floor that didn't look like an office. It looked like somewhere decisions got made and then never spoken about again. She'd expected someone who looked like money. She hadn't expected someone who looked like he'd decided, somewhere around age 40, to stop pretending that money was the point. Varro was standing at the window when she came in. He didn't turn around immediately. The room was all dark wood and low light, the kind of quiet that wasn't absence of sound but deliberate construction of it. There was a desk, large and clear of clutter, 2 chairs, a credenza with nothing on it. The whole space felt like a person who'd learned a long time ago not to leave evidence of themselves lying around. He turned. He was taller than she'd pictured. There was a scar along the left side of his jaw, faded but visible. The kind that meant it had been there long enough to become part of the face, rather than an interruption of it. His eyes were dark and careful, and he looked at her the way she looked at a balance sheet. Not to see what was there, but to find what was missing. "You found the account," he said. Not a question. "Yes, and instead of going to the authorities, you came here." "I went to the authorities," Tara said. "The authorities would ask how I found it. The answer would be that I work for the firm that was hiding it. I would become a person of interest. The money would disappear into a process that takes 4 to 7 years, and I would spend that time being managed." She paused. "And someone shot a gun in the building I was in an hour ago, so I was also running." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, but something adjacent to it, something that looked like recalibration. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He remained standing. That was, she understood, intentional. She filed it away the way she filed everything. "Not as a slight, but as data. The firm has been redirecting funds from 3 of my holdings," Varro said, "over 31 months. I became aware of it 8 weeks ago. My people have been attempting to trace the mechanism. The mechanism is an account called Trident Meridian," Tara said. "It's registered in Delaware. The authorized signatory is a man named Philip Greaves, who is listed as a consultant for Whitmore, but doesn't appear in any of their internal directories. The routing is done in tranches of under 400,000 to avoid flags. The last redirect was..." She looked at the printout. "Tuesday." Varro was quiet for a long moment. "You have this memorized," he said. "I have everything memorized. I've been looking at it for 4 days. Why?" It was a simple question. She didn't have a simple answer. The real answer was that she had found a wrong number, and wrong numbers bothered her the way a crooked picture bothers some people. A low, persistent discomfort that didn't let up until it was fixed. The real answer was that she'd been looked through by enough people in enough boardrooms that she'd developed a habit of knowing more than she was supposed to, just so she could feel like she was standing on solid ground. She said, "Because it was wrong." Varro studied her for another moment. Then he walked to the desk and sat down, and the dynamic shifted. Not in her favor exactly, but toward something more level. "You understand what kind of operation this is," he said. "I understand that it isn't a freight logistics company, and that doesn't concern you. What concerns me," Tara said, "is that I've spent 11 months doing clean work for a firm that was using me as cover. I found out. And now I'm sitting in a building whose address I found at the end of a very deliberate money trail, talking to a man who won't tell me his first name because the alternative was standing on a street corner in broken shoes waiting for someone to find me. She met his eyes. Yes, it concerns me. I'm still here. Another pause. Longer this time. What do you want? He said. I want to not be on whatever list I'm currently on, she said, and I want. She stopped. This part was harder. I want the work I did to mean something. Not the work I did for them, the work I did to find this. Varro leaned back. The chair didn't creak. Everything in this room was maintained. You're an accountant, he said. A very good one. I have accountants. You have accountants who didn't catch a 31-month diversion across 3 holdings, Tara said. I found it in 4 days as an outside contractor who wasn't supposed to be looking. The silence that followed was different from the others. It had weight to it, the particular weight of someone deciding something. There's a second account, Varro said. Branching off Trident Meridian, we haven't been able to trace it. Tara knew about the second account. She hadn't mentioned it. She had mentioned it now by not mentioning it. Varro saw that. She saw him see it. You already know where it goes, he said. I have a theory, she said carefully. I'd need access to the Whitmore internal system to confirm it. That can be arranged. It would need to be done without triggering an alert. Also arrangeable. She looked at him. He looked at her. The whole conversation had been, she realized, a kind of negotiation, one in which neither of them had stated terms and both of them had understood them anyway. And in exchange, she said, you work for me, Varro said, directly. Your name comes off whatever list you're on. You don't go back to Whitmore, you don't speak to anyone about what you found, and you don't ask questions about operations that aren't financial. How long? 1 year. After that, renegotiate or walk. I want it in writing, she said. Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. No one asks me for things in writing, he said. I'm an accountant, she said. I don't do handshakes. He looked at her for a moment that went on longer than it should have. Then he picked up a pen and pulled a sheet of paper from the desk drawer and wrote something on it and slid it across to her. She picked it up. Read it. It was brief and specific and legally meaningless if she took it to any court in the country, and somehow more binding than anything she'd signed in the last 11 months. She folded it once and put it in her pocket next to the printout. I'll need a workspace, she said, with a second monitor, done, and coffee. Real coffee, not the pod kind. He looked at her like she was, possibly, a new category of thing. Done. And I don't work weekends. You'll work when the work requires it. She considered that. Fine, but I'm taking the holidays. He said nothing. She took that as agreement. She stood up. Her heels still hurt. The fluorescent fear that had been running through her since the parking garage had settled into something flatter and stranger. Not calm, exactly, but the particular steadiness that comes from having made a decision and knowing, bone deep, that it was probably the wrong one and also the only one available. Mr. Varro, she said. He was already looking back at the window. Varro. Just Varro. That's what I said. She nodded once and walked toward the elevator. Behind her, she heard him speak again, quietly, almost to himself, Tara. She stopped. The second account, he said. Where does it go? She turned halfway. A private equity firm in Connecticut, registered 18 months ago. The principal on the filing is someone called Gerald Whitmore, Jr. She paused, the son of the man who owns the firm. The silence that followed was the kind that meant something was being set into motion. She turned back and pressed the elevator button and watched the doors close and did not think about what was being set into motion. That wasn't her department. Her department was numbers. She started on Monday. They gave her an office on the 14th floor. It had 2 monitors, as requested. The coffee situation was, in fact, real coffee. A machine in the corner that ground the beans fresh, which she discovered by accident at 7 in the morning on her first day, and spent approximately 30 seconds just standing in front of it. She was not going to say anything about the coffee to Varro. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. The work was, in its own way, a relief. She had expected something murky, something that felt like touching something she shouldn't. Instead, it was just math. The underlying operations were not her concern. She had agreed to that, and she meant it. And what remained was a set of financial structures of considerable complexity that had been managed, she saw quickly, by people who were competent but not exceptional. They thought in straight lines. They didn't look around corners. She looked around corners. By Wednesday, she had produced a 12-page analysis of the Whitmore diversion that traced every dollar back to its origin point and forward to its destination. By Thursday, she had identified 2 additional exposure points in Varro's holdings that had nothing to do with Whitmore. Inefficiencies, not theft, but the kind of thing that accumulated. She wrote it up in a memo, clean, specific, no editorializing. She left it on the desk of the man in the charcoal suit, whose name turned out to be Renfield, and who looked at her with the same careful blankness as before and said he'd make sure Varro received it. Varro called her into his office the next morning. "This is from this week," he said. "Yes, you've been here 4 days. The inefficiencies were visible in the first data pull," she said. "I just needed time to quantify them." He looked at the memo, then at her. "My previous analyst missed these. Your previous analyst was probably looking at the right columns," she said. "You have to look at the space between the columns." He set the memo down. "Explain that." She sat down. She'd started doing that without waiting to be invited, which she could tell registered with him, and she explained it. The way numbers generated by human decisions always have a shadow. The way what isn't spent tells you as much as what is. The way a clean set of books is only clean if you're not looking at the shape of the cleaning. He listened, completely. She'd learned, over the first 4 days, that this was one of his only consistent qualities. When he listened, he didn't do anything else. He didn't check his phone, didn't look at the window, didn't shuffle papers. He just listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that information was a resource, and wasting it was its own kind of loss. It was, she thought later, the thing she found most disconcerting about him. Not the scar, not the way his security operated in her peripheral vision like weather, always there and never acknowledged. Not the fact that she'd once heard him end a phone call with 3 words in what she thought was Russian and had felt, briefly, like the building had shifted half an inch to the left. Just the listening. The Whitmore situation resolved, in Varro's world, the way such things apparently resolved, quietly, quickly, and without any of the paper trail that would have preceded a legal process. Gerald Whitmore Jr. was no longer, as of the 3rd week of her employment, in a position to divert anything. She didn't ask how. She saw the account close in the system, and she logged it and moved on. Philip Greaves, the ghost consultant, surfaced in a business registry in the Cayman Islands 6 weeks later under a different name. She flagged it. Renfield received the flag. She never heard anything else about it. This, she came to understand, was how it worked. She asked about it once, not about a specific outcome, but about the general architecture. They were in his office late on a Thursday, both of them working through a restructure of a holding company in Nevada, when she looked up from the spreadsheet and said, "Do you ever use the legal system?" Varro looked up from his own papers. For what? For any of it. He considered the question with the same seriousness he gave everything. When it's useful, and when it isn't, there are other systems. She nodded. She looked back at the spreadsheet. Okay. He watched her for a moment. That doesn't trouble you. I find $12 million diversions in my spare time, she said. I have a pretty high threshold for trouble. The quiet that followed was almost, comfortable was the wrong word, recognizable. Maybe. Like a frequency she'd stopped having to strain to hear. 2 months in, she started to notice other things. She noticed that he arrived at the building before she did. Every morning, regardless of what time she came in. She tried coming in at 6:45 one Tuesday, and he was already there, jacket off, the light in his office already on. She noticed that he ate almost nothing during the day. She saw evidence of it in the bin beside the coffee machine, a single paper cup, sometimes a wrapper, but nothing like a meal. She noticed that on Fridays he was different. Not softer, but less constructed, somehow, like a system running with slightly lower power consumption. She noticed that he had read the same book 3 times. She knew because it sat on the credenza, and she was an observer by trade, and the cover was worn at the top right corner in the way that meant it had been opened from that corner over and over. She didn't ask about the book. She also didn't stop being aware of it. What she was less prepared for was the moment she walked into his office to drop off a revised forecast and found him standing at the window with his hands behind his back and something on his face that she had never seen there before. Not the careful blankness, not the calibration, something older and quieter and less managed. She set the folder on the desk and said, "I can come back." "No." He turned. The expression was already gone, not hidden, just returned to where it usually lived. "Sit down." She sat. He looked at the folder without opening it. "How long until we're clean?" She knew what he meant, the restructure, the loose ends. 4 weeks, maybe 6. "There are 2 holdings I still want to go through manually. You don't trust the automated review. I trust it for what it finds," she said. "I don't trust it for what it doesn't know to look for." He nodded. He still hadn't opened the folder. He was doing that thing, she noticed, where he was present and somewhere else at the same time. She had learned to read the difference. It was the difference between the Varro who ran numbers and the Varro who ran other things, and the other things were, this evening, closer to the surface. "My father built this from nothing," he said. It was not a non sequitur. She understood that. It was context. He was not a careful man. He was effective. And then he was dead at 61 from things he'd been carrying since he was 20. He paused. "I've been trying to make it clean. The financials," she said. Not a question. She understood that too. All of it, as much as can be cleaned. He looked at her. "You came in here with a printout and no leverage and told me I owed you a job." "I told you I had something you needed," she said. "That's different from leverage." "Is it?" "Leverage means I could have hurt you. I didn't have the ability to hurt you. I had the ability to help you. Those are very different positions." He looked at her in the particular way he had, the balance sheet way, the looking for what was missing way, and she felt it the way she always felt it. Not quite comfortable, not quite uncomfortable, but present. The way you feel a change in barometric pressure before you can see the clouds. "Your contract," he said. "The year is up in 6 weeks. I know. What do you want?" She thought about the question. She thought about the apartment in Queens and the radiator and the loan and the way the coffee machine in the corner of this office ground the beans fresh every morning. She thought about the 4 months of doing work that was actually hard, that actually required her to stretch toward the edge of what she knew and then past it. She thought about what it had felt like to come in every day to a place where, for the first time in 11 months of professional life, the quality of her attention was not just tolerated, but expected. "I want to renegotiate," she said. "To what terms?" "Better ones." Something in his face, not a smile, still not a smile, but something in the family of one. "You'll have to be more specific." "I know," she said. "I'm working on it." The city hummed outside the window. The light in the office was low and amber and steady. She had learned over these 4 months to trust the steadiness of things that had been deliberately constructed. Not because they were permanent, but because they were honest about what they were. "Take the time you need," Varro said. She nodded. She stood up. She picked up the folder she'd brought in and then set it back on the desk. "Open that before morning," she said. "There's a number on page 3 you're going to want to think about." He looked at the folder, then at her. "Good number or bad number?" "Complicated number," she said. "The best kind." She walked to the door. Behind her, she heard him reach for the folder, heard the soft sound of paper. She did not hear him say anything. She didn't need to. The numbers, as always, said it for him.